Action, take one. Hi guys, welcome to Ruben's prayer time. Today we are going to be a little bit active in our prayer time. People can use their bodies in different ways when they pray. Some people stand. Some people sit or kneel. Some sway or move their feet. Some people place their hands together, and some people clasp their hands. Some raise them high or place them on their knee. Some open their arms as wide as they can. So we will use some of our bodies as we pray today. Let's start with reaching to the sky. And then we pray, Dear God, you are above us. Now touch your toes. God, you are below. Put your hands to your heart. God, you are inside. And make a big circle with your arms and say, God, you are all around. Now point to your eyes and open them wide and pray, God, open our eyes to see the world and people around us. Bless people making changes in the world and help things that need changing. Now hold your hands and stretch your fingers as wide as you can. God, help us to use our hands. Help us to help others, to do your work, to show kindness and make changes. Now place your hands on your heart. We will have a few moments where you can share things that made you happy or sad this week. Share them with God just now. Now walk on the spots all around the room. God, we ask that you help us to follow your example. Guide us to go out into the world and make positive changes. Help us to build people up with the words we use. Dear God, thank you that each of us has a special place in the world. Help us to see small and sometimes bigger ways we can make a difference, and help us to change the world. Amen.
Hello and welcome to the fourth of our films for this year's Self-Denial Appeal. This week I'll be talking to Melinda Boone in the Philippines territory. Melinda is now based at divisional headquarters, but she's worked in anti-human trafficking and modern slavery for the best part of a decade. She features in the Salvation Army's Helping Hand Appeal films from last year. While self-denial money doesn't directly support anti-human trafficking work, it does help fund some of the infrastructure that makes it possible. That means people like Melinda can visit groups, including CORE, so that people are more aware of the risks to themselves, their children and their wider family. And the risks are very real. When wages are low and jobs are scarce, the offer of good money for working abroad is difficult to resist. The reality is often forced labour and exploitation. Her team also supports survivors of trafficking as they return home and reintegrate with their families. Sounds to me like Melinda's got a lot on her plate, but it turns out that's not all she does. Hi Major Melinda, can you hear us?
Yeah, hello, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. How are you? And where are you?
I'm here in General Santos City, that is somewhere in South Cotabato, in the province of South Cotabato in the Philippines. So I am here, the Divisional Secretary for Program and Youth in Mindanao Island Division, Philippine Territory.
Wow, that is a really long title. I hope you can get that on a badge somehow. So, can you tell me a bit about what your role involves?
Yeah, so as a divisional secretary for program, I am the overseer of the core program in the division as well as in the youth department. And I have also an additional role as the national contact person for modern slavery and human trafficking. So that is another challenging role.
2020 has been a big year for our world. What's it been like on your side of the planet in Philippines?
Yes, the COVID-19 pandemic really brings dramatic change in the way we used to it. Like, for example, in the core, especially here in Mindanao, because not all of our comrades have internet connections. And we only use Messenger, just for text. But we don't have face-to-face worship, especially for youth activities, because 18 below are not allowed to go out in their homes.
Okay. People under the age of 18 are not allowed out of their homes. Is that what you said?
Yeah, below 18, they should stay at home from March until now. That is one of the government restrictions. So we have also what we call now Sunday lockdown. So nobody is allowed to go out every Sunday. So meaning to say we don't have worship on Sunday, but we rely on online house worship. But this December start now the face-to-face with 50% of the congregation can attend.
Well, that's good that things might be easing. What's the impact of the coronavirus pandemic been on modern slavery and human trafficking?
Yeah, our Department of Justice have recorded almost threefold cases, especially on online sexual exploitation of children. So our cases really has a dramatic rise up. So we are right now there is an ongoing online awareness campaign about online sexual exploitations to protect the family, our children, so most of their time are on internet.
Yeah. So it's great to see the Philippines really spearheading the Army's response to this in your part of the world. What does resilience mean to you in these days?
Yeah, we Filipinos are really resilient people. Just recently, we have this Typhoon Ulysses that damages a lot of regions, especially in national capital regions, where there are a lot of floods. And really, it is so hard, but we have this smiling spirit that we can still smile amidst of storms, amidst of many troubles that is happening surrounds us.
That's really encouraging to us. What would you say the things that you're learning about yourself and life because of the coronavirus pandemic?
We learn a lot. When I was in my core, in that little core, I have a lot of vegetables garden at the back. So every Monday, I go around with my comrades and bring them some vegetables. And our neighbors who are also struggling for their daily needs, so they will also knock to my door and said, "Oh, Major, can I have this? Can I ask for your papaya, for your other vegetables? Because we need to survive." And that is really, I am thankful for that opportunity, to extend help and also to show practical love to my people because we are also challenged, but still we cannot stop helping others.
Yeah. So we're just really grateful that we could have this time together all the way from London to the Philippines. Yeah, God bless you and God bless the Philippines territory.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is an opportunity, and I'm so happy to be part of what you're also doing. God bless you, Captain Ben. Thank you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
In next week's film, I'll be making a call to Pakistan and talking to Fozia Columbus.
hungry, I come to you, for I know you satisfy. I am empty, but I know your love does not run dry. Hey, hey, hey.
Good morning, Bolton Salvation Army. It's great to be with you. My name's Ashley. If I haven't met you before, I am the Salvation Army officer in Stretford, and Sue asked me to share with you a bit today while she's been taking some well-needed days to study throughout the week. I want to talk to you today about Sabbath. It's actually a topic I've chosen because I'm not particularly good at it. You may have heard this word before, but if you haven't, it literally means to rest in Hebrew, and it's there from the very beginning of the biblical story, so it's rooted into the framework of creation. We read in Genesis 2 that when God had completed the creation of the heavens and the earth, on the seventh day he finished the work and he rested. And God blessed this day and declared it as holy because it was the day when he rested from the work of all his creation. Even though it's there, it's something we've been told, or I've been told my whole life, taught in Sunday school. It's never something I've been able to grasp or understand or practice well. Now, this could be to do with my personal nature. When I was training to be an officer, my fellow cadets nicknamed me a Duracell bunny because of kind of how generally energetic I am. And I don't even like caffeine. It's just all pure Ashley that I'm generally running on. It could be something to do with the fact I've grown up in church, and so Sabbath or Sundays, which are often thought of as being the Sabbath, are a day of busyness and doing. And as a church leader, they're full of responsibility. It could be simply because I'm not really the best at accepting things that feel very religious, restrictive or rule-based. I desire things to feel more organic and free, and so the Sabbath can feel a bit oppressive. You add COVID-19 into all of this, and I struggle even more to feel the need for rest, because I'm going to be honest, my default mode is to do not that much at the moment, because there's not that much to do. I'm actually desiring to be busy, to be doing, to be out there and to be active again, not to be stopping and resting. As a doer and an activist person in personality, the Sabbath often feels like an interruption to the progress of life. I just want to get on with stuff, and God's calling me to stop. I'm also really bad at giving up control in my life. And the Sabbath at its very root is about God providing, not myself providing. I wonder if you identify with any of these problems as well, if you can see yourself in them. Or maybe you're nothing like me and you find it super easy to engage in the Sabbath every week, to engage in this rest rhythm. I really, really love the Bible Project's videos that they've created, and they've made a brilliant one on the Sabbath. I want to give you guys a moment to check this out. It's going to come up on the screen, and then I'm going to share with you some of how this video's helped me to reframe my understanding of the Sabbath. Let's check it out.
The number 7 is a big deal in the Bible.
Yeah, in biblical Hebrew, the word 7 is connected to the idea of fullness or completeness.
And that's something we all long for, but don't often experience. Instead, we find ourselves working endlessly, fighting back chaos with no real rest.
Yes. Now keep all that in mind as we turn to Genesis 1 in the Bible. It begins with darkness and disorder, but then God speaks to bring about light and order so that life can flourish.
And this happens over the course of 6 days.
Each day is marked with the phrase, "There was evening and there was morning." But on the 7th day, something special happens.
God stops and rests.
Right. Creation is brought to its completion on the 7th day. And that phrase, "There was evening and there was morning," it doesn't appear on day 7.
It's like a day with no end.
On the 7th day, God's presence fills his creation. The land provides for all of God's creatures, including humans, who are appointed to rule the world with God forever.
Kings and queens of the 7th day rest. I can get into that.
But the humans are deceived by a dark power, and they forfeit that rest. They're exiled into the wilderness, where they have to work as slaves to the land.
Until they die and return to the dust from which they came.
But God wants to restore humanity back to that 7th day rest. So he chooses to give the family of Israel that experience of ultimate rest so they can share it with others.
But how? They're in Egypt, slaves to an oppressive empire who's grinding them into the dust.
So God confronts Egypt and he liberates the Israelites, taking them through the darkness and chaos on the way to the promised land.
Now, while they're on their way, they find themselves in the wilderness. It's easy to get lost, life is a struggle. They're not in the land of rest yet.
But while they're on the way, God invites them in the wilderness to start living as if they're in the promised land.
But how do you practice the future rest in the wilderness?
Well, God tells them that every 7th day they are to stop their work, or in Hebrew, to Shabbat, so that they can rest and enjoy God's good world.
So take a whole day to live as if the ultimate rest has already come.
Yeah, this is the Sabbath, celebrated every week on the 7th day. But there's more. The Sabbath is just one of 7 festivals that Israel practiced every year, each one anticipating that 7th day rest.
That is a lot of 7s.
And there's even more. Every 7 years, the Israelites were to liberate slaves, forgive debts, and let the land rest for a whole year. And then, every 7 times 7 years was the ultimate 7th day rest, called the Year of Jubilee. If anyone had lost their land or gone into debt, all was forgiven, everything restored.
Wow, so the Sabbath, these feasts, the year of Jubilee, it's all pointing towards the hope of future rest.
Right. Now, when the Israelites went into the land, they forgot their God, and so they forfeited their chance for rest in the Promised Land.
They're exiled and enslaved again by an oppressive nation, led back into a world of chaos and disorder.
But Israel's prophets said that their exile would end one day, and that the ultimate jubilee of freedom and rest would come, but generations go by, and they're still waiting.
It's at this dark point in the story that Jesus appears, and he launches his public mission on a Sabbath day.
Yeah, he read aloud from the scroll of Isaiah, saying that it was time for all captives and slaves to be released because this was the year of the Lord's favor.
What did he mean, this is the year of the Lord's favor?
He was talking about the ultimate jubilee.
Also, Jesus is claiming that seventh-day rest would come through him.
Right, he said that he was the Lord of the Sabbath, and he confronted disorder and darkness in all of its forms, liberating people from sickness, sin, even from death itself.
Yet, Jesus was killed, so even his work was undone.
Well, it seemed that way. But notice, Jesus timed his death to take place at the end of the week. His body rested in a tomb during the Sabbath, and on the 8th day, he rose from the dead.
Oh wait, the 8th day? You mean the first day of a new week?
Exactly. Jesus' resurrection was like the first day of a new creation, where God's light and life broke into the darkness.
So because of the resurrection, we have hope in God's promise of future rest. But we're not there yet. It's like we're still in the wilderness, where we experience struggle and pain.
But as we journey towards that ultimate seventh day, Jesus invites us to experience a taste of real rest now by following him. Or in his words, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest."
So one of my biggest misunderstandings and issues with the Sabbath has been that it's the feeling that the Sabbath is telling me to stop, to remove things, perhaps to empty myself, just to take things away. But as I watched this video and as I took in its teaching, I was able to see that the Sabbath is not a singular practice, but something that's connected into a wider rhythm in Israel's life. The seventh day and the 7 festivals, and then the 7th year, and then the 7 times 7th year, this year of Jubilee. It's opened my eyes to the fact that the Sabbath actually has a gigantic theme that's running deep through its practice that I'd previously missed as I've been thinking about it, and that's the theme of restoration. The wider practices in Israel's history are all about liberation, forgiveness, physical returning of things, resetting the scales, rebalancing society. It's restoring everything to how God intended it to be. For me, this actually seems like the opposite of emptiness and stopping and nothingness, and actually it's rather an extreme fullness, which is something I can get far more excited about. But here is where I, and maybe you, could easily fall down another rabbit hole, another misunderstanding. Fullness can feel like a pressure, like I've got to do and achieve a lot on the Sabbath in order to restore all things. And here's where I want us to delve into a story in Exodus 16. Now, this is one of the first times that the Sabbath is put into practice in what we read about in the Bible. And the Israelites are on a journey towards the Promised Land. They've just been freed from slavery in Egypt, but they're starting to get hungry. And they've actually started to pine after the slavery they were once in because they knew they were going to get their next meal. And God instructs them to trust him that each day he will provide the food they need. They are just to go out and collect enough for that single day, meaning each day they had to keep trusting that God would provide for the next one and the next one and the next one. We all know how hard it is to do this, don't we? That even though we may have experienced God's provision in the past, trusting him again in the future can be really hard. Some of the Israelites do get tempted to take matters into their own hands, and when they do this and they collect more than they need for just one day, the food actually goes rotten before they can even eat it on that second day. So they're instructed to keep trusting God to provide daily. But then God throws this curveball in, because he says that on the 6th day, the Israelites are to collect enough food for 2 days, because God isn't going to provide for them again on the 7th day. He says you have to trust me that the food you collect on day 6 will not go mouldy by day 7, which is totally opposite to what's been happening before. That's quite a head turner for them, isn't it? I mean, we read it here, Exodus 16, 21 to 26. After this, the people gathered the food morning by morning, each family according to its need, and as the sun became hot, the flakes that had not been picked up melted and disappeared. Then on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much as usual, 4 quarts for each person, instead of 2. Then all the leaders of the community came and asked Moses for an explanation. He told them, "This is what the Lord commands. Tomorrow will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath day set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today and set aside what is left for tomorrow." I love a sentence in the middle of there. The leaders were thrown and confused. They got used to one way of trusting God and giving him control, and now they're being asked to trust God and give him control in a totally different way. Just when they get used to one way of doing stuff, God asks them to do it differently. So they go to Moses and they ask him for an explanation. As I read this story, I see how the Israelites lived practically the Sabbath out every day in their lives, and reminded that the Sabbath is about trusting God for his provision, however he's going to provide it. It's a total giving up of control as a person and giving it over to God for whichever way he wants to provide. It is a day both for the restoration of all things and a day in which we can trust this restoration of all things to God, not to ourselves. It's not a day of hard work, of you trying to sort it all out, but a day of totally trusting that God can restore everything by his goodness and not our own efforts. But what does the restoration of all things really even mean? Right? What does it look like for our Sabbath? Well, Jesus started his public ministry on the Sabbath, as it said in the video, and he starts by reminding the people in the temple of this particular good news. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, and the oppressed will be set free." That's from Luke chapter 4, verse 18. So perhaps some important and useful questions we could be asking ourselves on the Sabbath, not as a rule-based, restrictive, oppressive regime, but as an invitation into restoration, might be things like this. What am I a slave to? What debt do I need to be forgiven, and what debt do I need to forgive? What do I need to have returned to me that the world or my work or people or expectations has actually taken away from me this week? What truth do I need reminding of? And as I'm asking these questions, I'm not relying on myself or even others to fulfill them, but I'm trusting the restoration of all things in my life, freedom from captivity, Jesus to forgive my debts, to remind me of who God has made me to be, to give me truth and light in the middle of chaos and disorder. I'm trusting all of this restoration to God through Jesus. We're reminded in Luke chapter 6 that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath. When he's walking through the fields with his disciples and the Pharisees start criticising for the fact that how on earth could they dare to pick grain on the Sabbath, Jesus reminds them that the Sabbath is not a rule that's more important than Jesus. Sabbath is not emptiness, but it's fullness. Sabbath is filled with compassion and grace and love. It's an invitation to full restoration, not an oppressive rule of judgment and boredom. So I said earlier, didn't I, that Sabbath can feel like sometimes it's getting in the way. It's an interruption to the progression I want to keep going through in life. But as I think about it as a full restoration in Jesus, I'm aware that The Sabbath is actually the only way to progress with our work. It's the only way to keep going in life, because let's face it, no more can I provide for myself than those Israelites could provide food in the middle of a desert. Sabbath is the start of our week. Sometimes it might be a day of activity, and sometimes it might be a day of stillness. Sometimes it might be a day of solitude, and sometimes it might be a day of socializing. Sometimes it might be a day of religious things, and sometimes it might be a day of things that feel more secular. But in all of these options, Sabbath is always a day of fullness, a day of Jesus, and a day when all things are restored through God and not ourselves. So I ask you this, because I have to ask myself this too. Is the Sabbath for me and for you about Jesus or about religion? Is the Sabbath for me and for you a type of rest that leads to emptiness, or a type of rest that leads to fullness? Is the Sabbath for me and for you something that I try and you try to control, or something we let God control and provide? Is the Sabbath for you and for me a time when we leave feeling restored or drained? This is the simple thing I want to say to you today, is God is inviting you into some full Jesus restoration time. And do you want to accept the invitation? I think I do. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his face towards you and give you peace.